So my name's Emma Wakawu, and I'll be your chair for the next 90 minutes as we explore CAPSEAH and hear from those in the sector about how participants see CAPSEAH working in practice. My role as team leader of the Resource and Support Hub, which has been operational since 2019 and has supported many organisations working in the humanitarian and development sector to strengthen safeguarding policy and practice. Today, we'll be talking to stakeholders from across the development, humanitarian and peacekeeping sectors about how the difference that CAPSEAH will make in their work. Given we have a large turnout today and our wide range of speakers, we won't be able to directly participate with the audience today, but there will be lots of opportunity to talk about CAPSEAH in the future. We would encourage you to post any questions you have in the Q&A function, which you will see. Given the time, we will not be able to answer all of them now, but we will follow up in writing with responses to each of the questions posed. If you do feel uncomfortable with any of the content, feel free to step away from the roundtable and re-enter as you would like. Thanks to everyone for posting in the chat. It's really great to see who is joining us today. So welcome to today's roundtable and welcome to everyone who's joined us from around the world. We're really excited to be hosting this and it's an opportunity really to hear from our panellists today who have joined us about CAPSEAH's potential to work in preventing and responding to sexual exploitation, abuse and sexual harassment. CAPSEAH is the culmination of collective learnings and best practice from within the sector and will provide an important framework for how organisations can ensure that they're operating as safely as possible. At RSH, we're delighted that CAPSEAH will enable us to continue supporting civil society organisations to work with a wide range of funders and partners through providing a common language which everyone can use regardless of the sector or location. RSH will continue to support organisations using CAPSEAH with a focus on contextualisation for the environment where organisations are operating. RSH will continue to host CAPSEAH via our online hub, so please be aware that you can find all the content on this platform. CAPSEAH is now available in 6 languages as we continue to reach global audiences. RSH works with global, regional and national stakeholders, and by using CAPSEAH, RSH will be able to continue this collective call to action which we want to see in order to deliver aid more safely and for SEAH to remain a focal point for donors and implementers. So we're joined today by a number of individuals representing organisations who've engaged with CAPSEAH, representing different sectors around the world. We will start off by hearing from Peter Taylor, who is the chair of the CAPSEAH Steering Committee and who will provide an oversight of CAPSEAH, an update to the consultation which took place late last year, and perhaps some of you were involved in this. We will hear about where the CAPSEAH is going and what might come next for it. So without further ado, I will hand over to Peter.
Great, thank you very much, Emma, and thank you to all of you for taking the time to join this. It's really fantastic to have so many people here. So let me just talk about why CAPSEAH is needed and how it can help. So look, it goes without saying that sexual exploitation, sexual abuse, sexual harassment causes huge harm to the people affected. And it also damages the trust in our work and the impact of the work that we're trying to achieve, whether it's in the humanitarian setting, development work or peace-related work. We know that there's far too much SEAH, far too many cases occurring, and we know that we don't know how many cases are happening. So much of it goes unreported. Also that vulnerabilities are rising as there's more conflict, displacement, climate putting more stress and strain on people as the climate changes. Vulnerabilities are rising, which means more and more people are at risk of being sexually exploited or abused or harassed. Over the last 20 years or more even, there have been quite a lot of policies, commitments and standards to try and protect people from SEAH. And they've been developed and adopted. If we look at the diagram on the left there, if we start at the top, the IASC, that's for those of you not familiar with that, the Interagency Standing Committee, that's the main UN body that coordinates action in the humanitarian space. They've developed a series of principles, a set of principles and some minimum operating standards, or MOS for short, on tackling sexual exploitation and abuse. Then to the left of that, you've got CHS, the Core Humanitarian Standard, which is overseen by the Core Humanitarian Standard Alliance, and you'll hear from them a bit later. Within that standard, there is a very strong thread of indicators and content on tackling SEAH. If you go back to the right on the United Nations, within the UN, there's been lots of resolutions. UN have lots of policies on tackling sexual exploitation, abuse, and also sexual harassment, which they tend to treat differently. Then in the peacekeeping space, going down to the next bubble, there's lots that's been done specifically to tackle sexual exploitation and abuse, which unfortunately happens all too often in peacekeeping operations. Going across from peacekeeping to the left-hand side, you've got something called the OECD DAC recommendation. So the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development has a Development Assistance Committee. And in 2019, that grouping, which is 30 plus major donors, agreed this recommendation to try and end and tackle sexual exploitation, abuse and harassment. And then lastly, at the bottom, you've got reference to a summit that took place in late 2018 in London, where lots of different groups made a series of commitments on tackling sexual exploitation, abuse and harassment, whether it was the international financial institutions, the United Nations, NGOs, donors, private sector, Red Cross, Red Crescent. So lots has happened. People have tried lots of different things. And as you'll see, the fact that we've put the IASC and the CHS right at the top, it's the humanitarian sector that's had particularly well-established standards and has taken probably the most action in this area. But many funders, donors, foundations, whoever's providing funding, often refer to those standards, the IASC minimum operating standards and principles, the CHS standard, in funding templates and expect partners to align to the spirit of them. But often what we've seen and heard is that many organizations say, well, I'm not a humanitarian organization, so they don't really apply to me. So I don't really understand why you're asking me to think about this. And what we've seen is that there's nothing overarching that covers humanitarian development, peace, that covers sexual exploitation, abuse and sexual harassment, that everybody working in humanitarian development and peace settings can align to. In a way, the 2018 summit was a first attempt to do that, but it was quite limited in scope in terms of who participated, who made commitments, and the final annual progress report was written this year, the 5th and final progress report, and there are no plans to report on those commitments anymore. Next slide, please. So the idea of something like CAPSEAH was first really floated about over 2 years ago in a meeting hosted by the United Nations involving over 90 countries. And since then, the work's sort of accelerated and been formalized through the CAPSEAH, through this international steering committee, which I've had the privilege to chair, and also a wide consultative network. And I'd like to express my personal thanks to all the other members of the steering committee who've contributed so much, and also people in the wider consultative network, and everyone who contributed through the global consultation, which Emma mentioned earlier. 93% of respondents, of the hundreds of respondents who completed the online survey and the many more who participated in meetings, said that they found the draft at that time very helpful or helpful. So it's been very much kind of a co-creation. So, but some of the things that came out of the consultation were, it needs to be really clear, the document needs to be really clear what we mean by sexual exploitation, what we mean by sexual abuse, what we mean by sexual harassment, what we mean by protection against these issues, what do we mean by humanitarian, what do we mean by development, what do we mean by peace operations. So all of that's been taken on board. A second major area of suggestion for improvements was around showing how CAPSEAH maps and aligns with the existing key standards of instruments that I outlined in the previous slide. So what we've done, also we've done that, and then there's also a request for more signposting to guidance, some case studies and some real examples to try and bring some of the suggested minimum actions in CAPSEAH to life. And then finally, there was a real sort of strong view that people didn't want this just to be a document, the end of a process once it's published, but to really be the basis for ongoing dialogue and collaboration. So we've tried to construct this in a way which it's here to last for, you know, at least the next 10 years, we hope. And respondents really welcome the multi-stakeholder nature of the endeavour, that it wasn't just humanitarian, wasn't just development, it wasn't just governments, it wasn't just donors, it was really open to everyone. We also welcome the fact that it's the core document is very short, and I'll come to that in a minute, but equally there is some quite comprehensive content online. Also, people felt that this was a real opportunity to better engage with national governments on this very difficult subject. And also that CAPSEAH could provide the clarity and consistency of the type of ask that funders make of their implementing partners. Next slide, please. So we went through this process, and last month the steering committee finalised the document, which was really exciting after so much work. So we've got a standalone document that you can print or look at online, and then there's an online tool as well that you can use, and that synthesizes key actions from existing standards, existing policies and practices, and tries to pull it together into something quite concise. So in terms of the document, you've got a very short summary document. In the English version, it's 2 pages. Then there's a longer full version, which is 8 pages in English. And in that document, you've got a collective vision for action. You've got a set of principles, and you've got some minimum recommended actions, and I'll unpack those in a minute. Then the online tool, there's practical guidance to help people, actors, anyone involved in humanitarian development peace work, to tailor actions, those minimum recommended actions, to their own roles, mandates and size. As Emma mentioned, you know, this is about contextualization. You can't tell everyone what to do. Every set of circumstances is slightly different, but you can have something, you know, broad and overarching. And if everyone's pulling together in the same direction, we can have much greater impact together. So that guidance has tips on how you can operationalize the key recommended actions at 5 different levels, which you can filter on the website if you want to focus on one particular group. So you might want to read it as an individual. What can I do? What should I be doing as an individual? Or you can look at it from the international level, or a national level, or as an organization, or thinking about it from the view of the project or program that you're involved in. So there are lots of links and signposting to further resources throughout. And as has been mentioned, the documents and the website are in multiple languages. I think we're up to, 8 languages now for the 2-page summary, and hopefully that will increase soon. Next slide, please. So just in terms of the substance, I mentioned these 3 parts. So the vision, we believe that if as many people as possible adopt this common approach, we can help keep more people safe from sexual harm. We can increase accountability and improve support for survivors. We can also increase the efficiency and impact of all of our individual and collective work to prevent and respond to SEAH, whether we're working in humanitarian development, peace settings, or a combination of all of them. It aims to clarify expectations of our staff for beneficiaries, recipients, and also for our staff in terms of what's acceptable and what's not, and also to help protect our staff from SEAH. So it's about expectations for our staff, our partners, and all stakeholders we're involved in. It's also about trying to help non-experts know where to start. And we're trying to also revitalise global commitment to tackle this issue and provide a long-term anchor for work. There was a lot of attention on this in 2018, 2019, and then it's increasingly been hard to get a focus on this issue as inevitably other things have come onto the international agenda. Next slide, please. So these are a summary of the principles and minimum actions. There are 6 principles. Hopefully they're all self-explanatory. Hopefully there's nothing there that anyone can argue with. SEAH is prohibited. We have 0 tolerance for inaction. Just to be clear, we're not saying we expect there to be 0 cases, but we are saying we will not tolerate people who don't take reasonable measures to try and prevent, and then also don't respond appropriately when cases occur. So that's what is meant by that 0 tolerance for inaction. We're saying that approaches should be tailored to the context, as I mentioned. We need to embed prevention as part of working culture. We need to respond appropriately to suspicions, reports, and incidents, and we need to respect the confidentiality and protect against retaliation. So 6 short, very clear principles. For number 1 and number 5, there is a little bit of detail underneath each of those, just to make it absolutely clear what we're talking about. But it all fits on one page of an English language PDF. Then we've set out suggested minimum actions. So we've grouped these into 6 areas where we think action is required to try and implement and live up to these principles. So it's around policies, leadership, communication, prevention, response, and monitoring. And under each of these 6 headings, there are on average about 4 specific actions that it's suggested that people think about taking to try and implement the principles. Next slide, please. So in terms of added value, just to stress again, this is multi-stakeholder, collectively owned. This is about joint working. Nobody has the answer to this. This is really difficult. It's something we've got to work on an ongoing basis. But if we use and promote the common approach, we can show our 0 tolerance for inaction. We can amplify and elevate the existing standards across all the work. We can improve collective action, partnerships, and collaboration. We can learn from each other. We can make it easier to talk about and jointly tackle sensitive challenges, and we can save time and money, and most importantly, reduce harm. Last slide, please. So what the requests are and next steps. Oh, sorry, one back. There are 2 more. That's just a QR code in case you haven't seen it, but hopefully through the information you've received, you've had a look at the website. Please read it if you haven't already. The website is changing all the time as well. So even if you read it, a week ago or something, I'd encourage you to have another look again, even if it's just the short summary, 2 pages in English, and have a look, and any feedback you want to give, and we're very happy to have conversations about it. Consider using the principles and the minimum actions in your work and engagement with partners. We believe it will help you and others and all of us if we all work in the same general direction. Consider endorsing it. This is voluntary and non-binding. Endorsement is of the 2-page in English summary, the very short summary document. Even if you feel that your organisation is expert in these areas, nothing like CAPSEAH exists or has existed before in terms of its breadth and its coverage. Endorsement signals your commitment to tackling SEAH. It will be noticed by others and it will make a difference. It's only a few weeks old, but we've already had a huge range of initial endorsers, over 100, close to 50 different countries. It's really encouraging, multilateral, bilateral, loads of different types of organisations. It's great to see, but this is just the beginning. We want to use this as part of an ongoing dialogue. So this, as I said, we got this from the feedback from the consultation. So do watch out for, and as Emma said, further webinars, deep dives, think pieces on how we can put CAPSEAH into action. This isn't about the document. This is about how we use the document to take action to make real change. So areas we're likely to focus on in the next year are around resourcing. How do we provide stable and sustainable resourcing for work on protection against SEAH? How do we collaborate better at a country level when we've got multiple different players and actors? How do we strengthen accountability? How do we provide better support for victims and survivors? And then in roughly a year's time, we will do a stock take, a light touch stock take. We'll work out the details of that, but we just want to get a sense of how CAPSEAH is helping. Hopefully it is helping, or hindering if that's the case, and how it could be improved. So I'll stop there, Emma, but hopefully that gives everyone a sense of what CAPSEAH is all about. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Peter. A quick presentation, but nonetheless very exciting, and thanks so much for the update and all the work that have been done. And I just wanted to say a big thanks to everyone who's been involved in the process so far, and those who have supported in the consultation, provided feedback, and also worked on the development of the document itself. For those who have not been involved, we encourage you to join the conversation on CAPSEAH, and please do stay in touch with RSH to share your stories of success, as well as any challenges which you face. We're really keen to support with this, and we've mentioned contextualization. We're going to be looking at translation and how CAPSEAH applies in different contexts around the world. So while today marks the start of the conversation on CAPSEAH, we hope that the document will create an anchor for dialogue as we continue to face change and uncertainty in the world around us. Peter mentioned that the document is for us to collaborate, it's for us to join in one voice. It is not to replace any of the existing standards or duplicate, but rather to kind of align us across the work which is being done. RSH will be looking to host a number of events over the next few months to generate discussion on CAPSEAH, and we will be looking to understand the enablers for what works to strengthen safeguarding against SEAH, as well as the challenges faced. We will now move on to the roundtable, which is very exciting, our virtual roundtable. And we have some questions which we would like to put forward to the participants who have joined us today. We want to hear from everyone who has joined us, and so I would like to ask everyone just to try and stick to 3 minutes if possible. Let's start off with hearing from Christian Saunders, the UN Special Coordinator on improving the United Nations response to sexual exploitation and abuse. Christian, how would you like to see CAPSEAH bringing global stakeholders together to talk about this important matter?
Thank you, Emma, and hello, everyone, and thanks for inviting me to participate in this CAPSEAH roundtable. Let me also take the opportunity to thank SCDO colleagues and members of the steering committee for all the hard work that went into CAPSEAH, which I have no doubt is going to be hugely helpful. Sexual exploitation, abuse, and sexual harassment are prevalent in every society and in every context, whether that's humanitarian, development, or peacekeeping. There is no country, no context, or organization where it is not an issue. It's completely unacceptable. It's a completely unacceptable abuse of power, as Peter said, and it's a breach of the trust placed in us by those we serve. It has no place in the aid sector, and we therefore need to do all we can to address it. Since taking up my position, I've traveled a lot and listened to many people, and it's become clear to me that we will not succeed in effectively addressing SEAH and sexual harassment unless we work together across the aid sector as equal partners. The UN, civil society organizations, international NGOs, national NGOs, academic and research institutions, local communities, and governments. We collectively need to move towards a more aligned, more harmonized, and more inclusive approach. Basically, we need to work together as one team. There are several ways I think that CAPSEAH contributes to this approach and how we can improve our collective efforts. Firstly, it can amplify existing standards and help foster a common vision. The CAPSEAH promotes a coordinated and comprehensive approach to safeguarding. It's clearly beneficial for all of us to be reading from the same script, to harmonize our standards, and to have a common vision on how we implement effective PSEAH programs on the ground. Far too often, I hear from the field that PSEAH policies are dense, complicated, and difficult to comprehend. Having simple, clear, and practical guidance and tools available and accessible in all different languages, including local languages, is crucial to our success in this area. The CAPSEAH presents us with a simple, consolidated guide, PSEAH tools, and best practices, which can then be replicated in different contexts. I hope that these tools and guidance will now be translated into as many local languages as possible and tailored to use in the different contexts. I think I'll leave it there, Emma.
Thank you so much, Christian, and thank you for continuing to be an advocate in this important area. We are also joined today by Dr. Gumhee Waige, Director of PSEAH at the World Health Organization. And I would love to hear from Dr. Gaia as to why is this so important to tackle now? What mistakes have been made in the past and what have we learned from these? And do we have a risk of being complacent?
Thank you so much, Emma, and hello, everybody. It's wonderful to be here. Thank you for having me. And it's wonderful to be with this community of people who are supporting CAPSEAH. Special shout out to Peter Taylor and FCDO colleagues. Okay, to answer your question, why is this so important to tackle now? I think it's always been important, as Christian and Peter said, you know, this is never acceptable. It's sexual misconduct by our workforce and by our partners is a violation of the trust placed in us. We are meant to save and serve. And if we end up harming people, if the price of accessing humanitarian or development aid or the price of benefiting from peacekeepers is sex, we must denounce it. I think it's more important than ever now for three reasons. I think there's growing acknowledgement of sexual exploitation, abuse, and harassment as a universal phenomenon, as Christian said, that it is really based on the exploitation of the power differential between us and people we serve and the people we serve alongside with, and with a sense of impunity. And I think we know much better about prevalence. Actually, Christian's office released data that said more than 6,000 aid workers had witnessed or knew of SEAH cases in the last year, but more than 5,000 did not report it. We're getting more and more data on prevalence, on the scale, on the scope, on the stakeholders who are involved in not just identifying the problem, but solving it. And also we are beginning to have a better idea of the solutions that are available to us. And lastly, I think there is a growing momentum. I think our outrage at this happening is now meeting commitment. And therefore, CAPSEAH comes at the right moment for all the reasons that were said before. Have we made mistakes? Well, I want to identify three things, and all of these apply to my own organization, the World Health Organization, but I think it's relevant to everybody. The first is about the fear, avoidance, and denial by organizations. While we tried to work on this, we came from this kind of avoidance and denial mindset. So we ignored this. We sometimes held people accountable, but we didn't take organizational accountability seriously. And we falsely, wrongly equated zero tolerance for this with zero cases. And we saw transparency as a problem, but in fact, transparency is a solution. The second is tokenism. I believe that we as a community often pay lip service, our leaders make speeches, but we don't follow up with preventive action, addressing our culture, and we certainly don't invest enough. So speeches have to be translated into people and money in order to make an impact. And the third is that I think we missed the target. We did not seriously take a holistic systems approach that focused on victims and survivors. Instead, we were worried about reputation. So I think these are some of the lessons we've learned. Is there a risk of being complacent? Absolutely. because we're doing a lot of work and because we seem to be making progress, the risk of complacency is very high. And that's why launching CAPSEAH as a common framework for common conversation, common action is so important for this moment. Let me stop there, Emma, and hand back to you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gaia. And I really like the phrase transparency is the solution, not the problem. Really appreciate you joining us today. Thank you so much. Also from the UN, we have Najla Nassif Palma, who is the UN Victims' Rights Advocate. So Najla, CAPSEAH has embedded taking a victim survivor-centered approach with the common principles. I would love to hear what you see as the main challenges to taking a victim survivor-centered approach and how CAPSEAH could help with this.
Thank you very much, Emma. It's a pleasure to be part of this important roundtable. So understanding this centrality of protection and how to translate it in effectively integrate this in all our efforts, all of our initiatives to prevent and to respond to sexual exploitation and abuse and sexual harassment, in my view, it's our great challenge. We need to understand what is the spirit, the essence of a victim-centered approach, and then translate not just in policy, but in strategy, but in reality to make a difference in people's life. So the focus must be in the rights, in the safety, in the needs, dignity, well-being, wishes of the victims. And we all are accountable to victims and survivors. Well, my role as a victims' rights advocate is to work with UN entities, member states, civil society, human rights organizations, and other stakeholders to ensure that victims will have a voice, assistance, and justice. These are the three pillars of my vision. So when we talk about voice, is hear from them, identify their needs, but also get some feedback from the victims to know if we are in the right way in what we are doing. I'll come back to assistance, but when we talk about justice, of course, to ensure accountability, because they have suffered and they need to have a response, a strong one, but they need also to have access to remedies. Let's think about, for example, paternity claims when there is a child born of these wrongs. So work on justice means to enhance accountability to perpetrators, because we also have an impact as a prevention in trying to have no more victims. And finally, this is maybe a huge challenge, is assistance and support to victims and survivors. We know victims and survivors have different kind of needs, immediate needs, long-term needs, medical, food, psychological, but also when, again, we have a child that was born from these wrongs, paternity claims, the maintenance of this child. So we need to address this because we are failing in providing assistance to victims. Assistance is unfounded, insufficient, fragmented, not timely, uncoordinated, inadequate, inconsistent. And so how CAPSEAH could help us with this so important issue? To be more effective, we need a common approach and a shared understanding to our accountability to victims. In times of austerity like this, we need to build synergies, join efforts, optimize all the resources that we have, and be creative and innovative. So to address this issue, I will start a series of consultations to see how we can provide better resources to victims, resources to victims' assistance and support. We need to explore contextualized solutions and consider the establishment of a system-wide pooled funding strategy to cover assistance to victims. And I'm sure that CAPSEAH could help with this. Victims are our priority and must always come first. Thank you, Emma.
Thank you so much, Najla. Really great to hear from you on this matter. Colleen Rapnoe also joins us today from the CHS Alliance, and the CHS provides one of the best known standards on PSEAH. So a question to Colleen, what do you see, what do you and your members see as the added value of CAPSEAH?
So thank you, Emma, for this very interesting question. Maybe let me start by sharing one of the many messages that we recently received from a CHS Alliance member in Sana'a, Yemen, working for social justice and endorsing the CAPSEAH. And I'm going to read in quotes. So they say, our organization is particularly encouraged to see that the core humanitarian standard and its PSEAH index are central to the CAPSEAH framework, as this ensures that the principle of high quality and accountability are firmly embedded in this initiative. Aligning CAPSEAH with existing standards like the CHS strengthens our collective efforts to protect those we serve. And I close the quote. So for those who may not know us, the CHS Alliance is a global network of over 215 organizations, both from the humanitarian and the development sectors, committed to protecting people, including from SEAH, which, as you know, is a fundamental element of an accountable aid system. So, as mentioned by Peter at the beginning, the core humanitarian standard, or the CHS, a global framework of accountability which is adopted and championed by our members around the world, is recognized for its PSEAH benchmark, with commitments and requirements guiding organization in creating safe environments for both the people we serve and our staff and their staff. So what is the added value of CAPSEAH as seen by the CHS Alliance and its members? It lies in its ability to complement and reinforce the CHS accountability framework, among other things. So firstly, CAPSEAH offers principles and targeted action to help organizations meet the CHS commitment, such as implementing a victim survivor-centered approach, as mentioned by Najla, along with key PSEAH resources, tools, and best practices from multiple local and international organizations and actors to support the implementation of more robust preventive and responsive actions. Secondly, CAPSEAH also fosters collaboration by bringing together various stakeholders from the humanitarian, the development, the peacekeeping sectors, and today we are here also to show that, amplifying the impact of individual organizations, but also promoting a unified and coordinated response across the sectors I've just mentioned. Therefore, by aligning with CAPSEAH, organizations benefit from shared knowledge, practices, and learning, increase advocacy, and a stronger commitment to protect people and communities from SEAH. So this is the reason why CHS Alliance endorses the CAPSEAH initiatives and encourage all its members to do the same. So to sum up, CAPSEAH enhance the core humanitarian standard by providing additional support and a collaborative platform for improving and implementing PSEAH standards. And of course, the CHS Alliance and many of its members are ready to continue collaborating and coordinating with others to reinforce individual, organizational, and global accountability in the aid sector. And I will stop here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Colleen. Often the challenges we talk about are overcome by those working to deliver the aid directly. At RSH, we look to raise awareness of the challenges facing organisations through work with networks, working groups, and directly with CSOs. Today, we are joined by Ferdous Nahid, who is RSH's national representative in Bangladesh. Ferdous, could you tell us, does what Colleen has been talking about, does this chime with you? And what are the real world challenges of operationalising PSEAH at the local level for you in Bangladesh?
Right. Thank you so much, Emma. It's a pleasure being here today at the launch of the CAPSEAH. Yes, it does, Emma. You know that if we look at the challenges that civil society organization experience in operationalizing PSEAHs at the grassroots level, we'll find the need for a coordinated approach to PSEAH. The first challenge for CSOs is to develop a standard policy. Those who have a policy already, in most cases, are developed as part of the donor compliance, but not inspired by a true sense of commitment to zero tolerance, to misuse of power, do no harm, and survivor-centered approach. So CSOs that have gender policies, child protection policies, HR policies, they are also in confusion sometimes that still they do need to develop a separate PSEAH policy or not. So this puts importance on policy rather than the work going to protecting those we are working with. So this confusion becomes even more intense when it comes to reflecting the different donors' requirements in the CSO's policies. So which donors or standards should prioritize? So we receive these types of questions from local CSOs very often. So we think that here lies the importance of a harmonized approach like CAPSEAH, even among the donors too. So second point I want to make that CSO face, they can't afford a dedicated focal person. Usually the additional responsibility is placed on the shoulders of others. So for that person, that is tough. PSEAH is not a priority. So, and busy with his or her own program and the burn rate. So situation becomes worse even when this focal person leaves the organization in the middle of the project. So thirdly, the PSEAH is not integrated into CSO's fundraising. Some donors don't allocate funds for safeguarding activities. Rather, they ask CSOs to implement PSEAH activities on their own. So large and medium-sized CSOs may be bear this cost sometimes, but it is difficult for local and small-sized CSOs. So I think the CAPSEAH, here be a good help for the local CSOs, because CAPSEAH provides the local CSOs with a clear understanding of PHAs and donor requirements, also tailor PHAs approaches to the context and ensure the approaches are inclusive. It also provides the guidance on how to respond to appropriately to the suspicions, reports, and the incident of SEAH. So I will stop here, Emma. Back to you.
Thank you so much, Ferdows. I would also love to hear from Alon Plateau, who is from ICVA, to understand if what you've heard from Colleen and Ferdows is also common to you and your members at ICVA.
Thank you so much, Emma, and thanks to FCDO. It's a pleasure to be here today and at the launch of the Common Approach on PSEAH. My name is Alon Plateau, and I lead ICVA's safeguarding portfolio. For those who may not know, ICVA is a network of over 160 NGOs, both international and local. ICVA is one of the few NGO members of the Interagency Standing Committee representing our members and other CSOs in key policy and practice decision. I see many of the members connected today, so we do know that PSEAH is one of the priority areas for our members. And indeed, what we heard from Colleen and Ferdows echoes what we hear from our membership. Colleen, your insights on how CAPSEAH integrates and complements CHS are crucial, and we can see how accountability standards have been incorporated in CAPSEAH. Ferdows, you have highlighted the very real challenges NGOs face on the ground, from navigating policy requirements to limited funding and the need for a coordinated approach. Now, ICVA's primary focus is humanitarian, but many of our members have dual mandates or more, working across the nexus. PSEAH is shared responsibility of organizations, staff, governments, private sectors, and this is not excluded to the humanitarian sector at all. Although most PSEAH policy comes from the humanitarian sector, but as Peter said, no one can say PSEAH does not affect me. This makes CAPSEAH particularly valuable for us and our members, as it provides a unified framework that can be applied across this diverse context we work in. Now, NGOs often have the most advanced policies when it comes to PSEAH, certainly with sexual harassment, but as Fergus mentioned, they also often lack dedicated resources, and small organizations might need support in finding their way in this maze of policies and requirements. I think what we have seen firsthand through our work with the Safeguarding Resource and Support Hub and the PSEAH Outreach and Communication Funds, the importance of clear, unified guidance for local actors. CAPSEAH brings well-agreed policies and standards and integrates them with sexual harassment and up-to-date best practices such as survivor-centered approach. And we see the potential to help organizations achieve their PSEAH commitments effectively. By fostering collaboration, CAPSEAH enhances the shared knowledge across the aid sector and coordinated responses that are so vital given the resource and policy challenges many NGOs face. This is why ICVA endorses the common approach for its practical, inclusive, and collaborative framework and encourages its members to endorse it too. CAPSEAH is a good place to start the organizational journey for organizations seeking to enhance their policy across the humanitarian, development, and peacekeeping sectors. But we shouldn't forget that even the best policies will require resources to turn into safe programming in practice. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Alon. And so what we're hearing a lot of is that there is a high expectation on civil society organisations as well as others in the sector to kind of deliver on inclusive approaches, but with this limited funding. And this is also RSH's our experience when working with organisations for the last 4 years. If I could go back to Fergus and just ask, what are the issues facing the small, less resourced organisations, and how can CAPSEAH help them?
Right. Thank you, Emma, for this opportunity again. In my earlier speech, I highlighted some operational challenges, but we observe some other, issues. With the CSOs, like there's a gap in common understanding on PCAs, and it exists not only among the CSO staff and focal points, but also within the CSO leaderships. So due to the different perspectives on SEAH by different donors and INGOs, so local CSO often struggle to set their own priority and commitment while developing their policies. So besides, due to the limited resources, they cannot even hire experts to review their policies and practices to make desired organizational changes. So CAPSEAH can be a good help for local organization, as it suggests the common and minimum actions to protect from SEAH and brings policies, commitments, and standards in one place. And especially in particular, the part 2 of CAPSEAH would help local CSOs to set right principles and common commitment towards PSEAHs in their policies. On the other hand, the part 3 offers the practical guidance on required resources and strategies to put the policy into practice. So CSO leadership and focal person could easily find their role for building an organizational culture of zero tolerance, communicating policies with partners and communities, along with minimum action to prevention and response of HS complaints. So CAPSEAH, even in humanitarian response in Cox's Bazar, most of the local and national CSOs did not have the emergency experience. During the influx, they had to respond to this largest humanitarian crisis in the world. So most of these CSOs have done mainly the development work, but we feel that this CAPSEAH is also very helpful to these CSOs who are still new to the emergency work. So as after the introduction of CAPSEAH, RSS Bangladesh have disseminated it to different CSO network and platforms, and some CSO focal points shared their positive thought about CAPSEAH with us, and they are, feeling like they are feeling the need for a long time of this harmonization of standard and commitment on PSEAHs, but it is now live. So I think that CSOs and staff and leadership from local CSOs would be really happy with this CAPSEAH. Thank you, Emma. Back to you again.
Thanks again, Ferdows. It's great to hear your perspective on the challenges which organisations are facing. And it's really vital that we continue to emphasise the importance of partnerships and challenge ourselves to push for equitable partnerships in order for CAPSEAH to be applied in our work. One of the most striking aspects of CAPSEAH is on the engagement of empowering communities. George Washington University, the Global Women's Institute, focuses on this through their Empowered Aid initiative. Alina Potts joins us today from GWI, and I wanted to ask how CAPSEAH can help embed this as a mindset for those working in humanitarian development and peacekeeping settings, and help us often get a sensitive engagement right.
Thank you, Emma, and all of today's speakers. In my work with the Global Women's Institute, I've had the privilege of leading participatory research to reduce risk of sexual exploitation and abuse in humanitarian settings. This is called Empowered Aid, and it offers tools and resources for SEAH prevention that are grounded in the expertise of women and girls as those most affected by this type of abuse, yet often absent from discussions on addressing it. And when listening to them, we've heard the level to which many feel betrayed and even disempowered by the status quo. This is from a discussion with Sudanese adolescent girls who are living as refugees in Uganda. One of them shared when talking about food distributions, to me, concerning the issue of food, like these men or these humanitarian workers convincing women, and by convincing, she meant to have sex in exchange for food. I think security people should be deployed, but again, you find that at times these security people also turn themselves to do the same things. Now, how are you going to support us in this field? So whenever SEAH occurs, as has been said, it's a betrayal of the trust that is placed in aid agencies by the populations they serve, by their staff, by private and public donors that fund them. And it also reverberates through communities who often see perpetrators act with impunity. Rebuilding their trust requires a sustained and coordinated effort, and it has to be earned. Regaining trust cannot be assumed. So over the last 6 years of our work on Empowered Aid to build the evidence base on SEAH prevention, our experience has shown three things are critical to rebuilding trust: listening, putting what you hear into action, and time to do both of those. By listening, I mean listening to the experts, so those with lived experience of crisis, displacement, and the daily realities of accessing aid that they and their families depend on for survival. This is the foundation of a community engagement mindset, and it is embedded throughout CAPSEAH's 6 minimum actions, particularly the actions around communication, which outline a common approach to consulting, informing, and collaborating with local communities and partners. Action means applying what you learn to ongoing aid programming. Within Empowered Aid, this is done by partnering with international and local organizations, including women-led organizations, to integrate our findings on SEAH risk into the ways they design and monitor programs. And within CAPSEAH, especially the minimum actions for prevention, emphasize assessing SEAH risk and taking action to prevent SEAH across all activities. So by proactively identifying and addressing risky situations and settings, even in the absence of case reports, aid actors can better prevent SEAH from occurring. So to recap, listening is necessary to share power and be led by community-based expertise, and trust is built when communities see their words put into action. By outlining a common approach to community engagement and shared power, CAPSEAH provides a framework through which actors, both within and across humanitarian development and peacekeeping settings, can hold each other accountable for addressing the concerns of those affected by SEAH and ensuring they're heard, acted upon, and used to measure progress. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alina. Great to hear a bit more about your research work. As we know, CAPSEAH is intended for a number of audiences, and one of them is the international finance institutions, or the IFIs. The role of the development banks in tackling SEAH is significant. It would be really interesting to get some insights now about the unique challenges they face and how CAPSEAH can help embed a PSEAH mindset in the IFI's business models. We are delighted to be joined today by Andrea Cullinan from the International Finance Corporation, who is going above and beyond by joining at nearly midnight her time. Over to you, Andrea.
Thank you very much, Emma, and thank you also again to the collective wisdom that has contributed to the development of CAPSEAH. The global consultations have really proved that CAPSEAH has hit a very important need. So I'm going to just run through what we do from the multilateral development bank perspective, because we are actually are an important player in the field of humanitarian and development and peace context, but people don't recognize us so much in the space of working on protection against SEAH. It's something that we are also in a learning journey, and we're at a relatively early starting phase compared to the work that has been going on for a very long time in humanitarian sector. So bear with us, be patient with us as we are learning and maybe repeating some of the same mistakes that others have already learnt their lessons from. So who are we as multilateral development banks? Well, development financial institutions, or DFIs, known as development banks, are non-commercial institutions that provide capital for economic development projects. We all have the development goal of addressing poverty, promoting shared prosperity, inclusion, and equality. So as our core business, how do we actually think that CAPSEAH will be important to our business models? Let me just run through that. While differing from conventional humanitarian and development organizations, with our focus as multilateral development banks on private and public sector investments in developing countries, multilateral development banks really have an important role to play in helping states realize the right to development. We directly finance investments that are needed for the realization of the SDGs. We leverage resources from the private sector and so forth. We invest in transport, energy projects, water projects, communications projects, infrastructure projects that are a really important part of the development effort in countries. Furthermore, with what we do, we leverage not only our finance and our commitment to financing development and helping states with their right to development, we actually also play an important advisory and a normative role in connection to the development of national policy, legal, regulatory frameworks. So we use our influence in that way. However, in order for us to contribute effectively to sustainable development and shared inclusive prosperity, it's really crucial that we take measures to avoid negative impacts on people, including, of course, SEAH. We're guided by all the international standards, including the UN Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights and all the key labour agreements. And now CAPSEAH is joining our suite of guidance that we are rolling out with our clients across our projects. So to this end, all MDBs, multilateral development banks, have established safeguarding programs. We all have environmental and social safeguard systems relating to human rights, relating to gender equality, and to SEAH. And these are incorporated into our due diligence processes. Just as a quick snapshot of that, just to say that this is also not new for us, even though we are definitely on the journey of strengthening our work on protection against SEAH. Since at least 2018, the Safeguarding Summit that Peter referenced in the very beginning in London, 10 international financial institutions, IFIs, reaffirmed their commitment to preventing SEAH through signing up to 7 commitments, which we have all been working on consistently since then and reporting, although as Peter says, this year we complete our reporting, but we have moved on. We've grown as a group of MDBs since then. We recognise this is also a long-term commitment for all of us, including MDBs. So what we're in the business of doing for each MDB institutionally now is we're promoting all survivor-centred approach through all our policy and frameworks. We're incentivising cultural change through our leadership, through organisational accountability. We're all strengthening our human resources. We've got new specialists coming on board who are working on the issue of SEAH and so forth. So we're all at different stages, if you like, of really ramping up our commitments to this. CAPSEAH will really help us. It's very timely, I think, for MDBs. MDBs have always struggled with the guidance on SEAH, which largely has come from the humanitarian sector and largely focuses, I think, around NGO work and so forth. And so for MDBs, they haven't often seen themselves reflected in that guidance. So we've struggled in how to interpret that across to the MDB world, so the development sector, development finance sector. And what it means is that therefore means that we've struggled to interpret that across to our clients. Our clients can be governments, in the case of public sector work. It can be companies in the case of private sector work, all in developing contexts or humanitarian contexts. But they're our target audience. They're the people that we work with. And we have to communicate about SEAH in a way that actually really they understand. So CAPSEAH for us is a way to really be able to communicate this effectively in a very brief way, a user-friendly way, a way that our clients and our projects will actually see themselves into it and be able to read the guidance and actually know how it applies to them. So I think it's really effective for non-traditional actors like ourselves and our clients to really capture the message of protection against SEAH. So for multilateral development banks, we're all reviewing our environmental and social safeguard policies. We're at different stages of development on this, of course, but we're reviewing it with a view to SEAH, to protection against SEAH. So, for example, the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development are currently in their process of updating their policy standards. The Asian Development Bank are also at reviewing their standards. International Finance Corporation, we're reviewing or about to embark on updating our environmental and social safeguard standards with a particular view to embedding SEAH into all our policy frameworks. So it'll be exciting in the future because that will be a policy that those standards are something that we ask our projects to always comply with. But we also have strengthened accountability mechanisms. For example, the African Development Bank's Independent Review Mechanism 2021 actually has specific guidance around SEAH. We've also been all looking at our legal agreements with clients. We're embedding covenants about reporting on SEAH, etc., with our clients, and thanks in some part to pressure from funders and donors who are expecting that also as part of all our work with clients and so forth. So we are really been held accountable for this. We're doing it. We're being held accountable as well. We're also developing a lot of guidance and resources. For example, the Asia Development Bank has recently published, in the last few months, I believe, published their good practice note on addressing SEAH in ADB finance projects and civil works. The World Bank also published its good practice note on SEAH in civil works a few years ago now. We're all doing SEAH risk screening and action plans as relevant on all our projects. That's automatic. I know for World Bank Group, we're doing it as a compulsory part of any project development. So there's a lot of work that we're doing. We're constantly trying to identify SEAH risks in our projects. We're constantly trying to improve our procedures. We're also doing a lot of internal stuff, capacity building, etc., etc. All the work that, of course, you all well appreciate and know. So what's in it for us? What's CAPSEAH in it for us? I mean, you can see that it's really changing our business model from a development bank perspective, but we're passing this down to our clients. And that's for us the next frontier, is how we translate CAPSEAH and promote it, promulgate it across all our user groups. So that's where we're at. Thank you. Back to you, Emma.
Thank you so much, Andrea. And it's fantastic to hear about the various banks and where they are on their journey. And for your kind of honesty and openness about talking to us about this today. We know that the private sector often uses maybe slightly different terminology. So, for example, in the humanitarian sector, when we talk about SEAH, it's clear, but sometimes with the banks, they have different terminology. But what we do know is that the root causes do remain the same. I'd like to welcome Abida Peters, who is with us today from NIRAS. And NIRAS's work focuses on climate change and infrastructure. Abida, during the development of CAPSEAH, we often heard that there's lots of guidance which is already out there, and CAPSEAH, it may not be needed. I wanted to firstly ask, do you agree with this? And how about the perspective of the private sector when working in the development space?
Great. Hello and slums, everyone. It's an honor to be with you all today. Thank you for sharing your valuable insights and for the question, Emma. Like you said, my name is Abida Peters and I'm the Safeguarding Manager with NIRAS, a global consulting company that specializes in environmental development. I also represent the Safeguarding Leads Network, the SLN, which is an umbrella group of safeguarding leads across the private sector who proudly endorse the CAPSEAH. I can understand the hesitation and concerns people may have about introducing a new set of principles and guidance, but I would not agree that it's not needed. The risk of SEAH in development work is just as high as in humanitarian peacekeeping sectors, but the knowledge of how to prevent and protect people from sexual exploitation, abuse, and harassment is low. To have a common approach is very much needed and welcomed. I support safeguarding work on 2 initiatives, which are funded by the UK's Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs, DEFRA. One of those is the Biodiversity Challenge Funds, as well as the recently launched Ocean Fund. When I was first brought on board with NIRAS, part of my task was to assess the safeguarding and PSEAH capabilities of projects from around the world. It felt like a monumental task to assess hundreds of applications in a fair and consistent manner, and then to direct projects and organizations to resources that were simple, clear, and easy to understand. The CAPSEAH, at that time in draft form, ended up being the foundation for my work, as it provided a simple and clear outline of what common principles underpin good safeguarding and PSEAH work. I used the minimum actions to create a simple assessment process that allowed me to not only review applications in a timely manner, but also to provide clear and direct feedback on what projects could do to meet minimum requirements and improve. We now recommend projects familiarize themselves with the CAPSEAH principles, the minimum actions, and the practical guidance through information on our program websites and in feedback letters. The accessible language and practical guidance makes the CAPSEAH particularly suited to the development sector who have previously not been a focus of PSEAH work. Similar to what our colleagues have mentioned in the humanitarian peacekeeping organizations, safeguarding in the private sector is often an additional responsibility for staff. So having clear, concise guidance is essential to see progress in protecting people from SEAH. I'm grateful for the support of our colleagues from FCDO, DEFRA, and various organizations from the private sector through the SLN to take this work forward. I see CAPSEAH as a useful tool to increase engagement and dialogue around this important topic, and hope that it serves as a means of bringing all parties in the aid sector together for the common good. Thank you so much, and I look forward to connecting and working with you in the future.
Thanks so much, Abida. A great insight into how CAPSEAH is already being used to ensure international standards are being adhered to. We've heard from all of our speakers, and while working in different sectors, the key messages do appear to be common in that it is a united approach. There are a lot of kind of individual journeys for organisations, but also there's kind of competing priorities and often restricted funds around SEAH. So we do encourage you to share with us. Please do stay in touch with the Resource and Support Hub. We would love to hear more from you. Could I also encourage you to post your questions or comments in the Q&A section, which you'll find at the bottom of the screen. We would love to hear from you. We would love to have some insight to understand your thinking around CAPSEAH and how your organisation could use it. As we come to the end of the roundtable, I'd like us to turn our attention to next steps. And I have two final questions. The first is to Dr. Gaia from the World Health Organization to ask, what do you think the future is for CAPSEAH? And can we really make sure that CAPSEAH is adopted and put to use?
Thanks, Emma. Thank you for helping me reflect on this. So what is the future? I hope the future is very bright, but the future is in our hands. And I'll tell you why I think it's very bright. I think for me, CAPSEAH builds on the work that has been done since the Secretary General's Bulletin in 2003, which is a couple of decades ago, and a lot of work has been done. And we can be proud of the work that's been done. But if we look at it from a victim survivor point of view, if you look at it from the expectations and the ethical expectations that those of us, you and I and everybody here want to uphold in the development, humanitarian or peacekeeping sectors, that of ethical behavior, of integrity, of not harming others, we can clearly say not enough has been done. And I believe that the consultation process, the joint thinking, the joint work that has gone into CAPSEAH has, if you like, allowed us to take all of these building blocks of the last 21 years and forge a new foundation for how this work will continue in the 21st century. And I think it will help us do better, be faster, prevent more, respond in a more effective way, and for institutions to really change in a broader perspective. I really believe that we have the opportunity with this, and this is where the future is, to go from fragmentation to consolidation. For me, to bring sexual harassment and sexual exploitation and abuse under one framework is, I believe, really futuristic, is visionary, and it is essential because the perpetrators are the same, despite the fact that we in our system like to fragment how these two very heinous issues are dealt. The second is it helps us to go from piecemeal work to more holistic, really looking at risk management, leadership, prevention, accountability, and so on. It helps us to go from a siloed approach, whether it was the different sectors, whether it's our different agency focuses, whether it's SEAH and SEAH, to really a more collaborative approach. And in the 21st century, collaboration is the only way we will move forward for impact. I think it takes us from great statements and visions and policies really to action. It helps us move into action. And I think it takes this topic from being a dark, in the shadows, complex topic, and it simplifies it in language and in recommendations and actions that we can all understand. But a framework is a framework. It is an empty shell, although we have all worked so hard to get it to this place. And I think the framework symbolizes our intent. But in the next stages, to make it really bring it into our lives and our work, we need commitment. Commitment means we need to all read it, we need to socialize it, we need to understand what the principles and the actions mean. We need to, based on that, take action, and we need to collaborate for action. This is not action that is in our individual agencies or in our individual sectors. And the third thing to really make it live is for us to be mindful and reflective while we take action, and to learn and to share those learnings together. So I think going forward, we do need some periodic reflection on how this is implemented, what are the challenges, so we can recalibrate and get better. Continuous learning and continuous recalibration is the only way to go. My hope and wish is that this will be the new foundation. But last but not least, I think it is a moment of reflection as we come together. And I hope that we reflect in a way to use this framework to mainly prevent this from happening in the first place. And when it does happen, we really put the victims and survivors at the center of all the principles, all the actions, all the commitments that we make. And I really am very optimistic, and I'm really grateful to have been part of today with such a big and committed community. Back to you, Emma.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gaia. Lots of food for thought in what you said, and really looking forward to carrying on the conversations, not only with you, but with everyone on this roundtable. Fantastic. My final question goes to Christian. We've heard from a range of participants at our round table about their engagement with CAPSEAH. In your role as UN Special Coordinator on improving the United Nations response to sexual exploitation and abuse, are there any final words of encouragement you'd like to offer the audience to encourage everyone to grasp this opportunity and use CAPSEAH to improve collective multi-stakeholder action to tackle SEAH?
Thank you, Emma, and thank you to all the speakers. Because, as Dr. Gaia said, there's a lot to reflect on there in terms of where we should be going in terms of consolidation, in terms of collaboration, in terms of inclusion, but above all, ensuring a victim and survivor-centered approach. Let me also apologize to Abida, because I didn't talk about the private sector in my first response. And I think sometimes we forget the private sector, who are critical partners for our delivering on our programs. And we need to ensure that their efforts are aligned with the rest of ours on this particular issue. I think the launch of CAPSEAH is an important step. And as colleagues have pointed out, it does not require formal endorsement for you to use it. The most important thing is for you to use it. In addition to the common vision, I think we need to adopt. I think we need to adopt it in practice. I believe it was Benjamin Franklin who said, "Well done is better than well said." And I think we need to harmonize our work in concrete and impactful ways. As Dr. Gaia said, we've made some progress, and there are some really important initiatives ongoing at the moment, but I think much more can and should be done to align our PSEAH efforts across the aid sector. The harmonized reporting scheme from the CHS Alliance, I think, is a great example of how we can achieve this. Dr. Gaia and others talked about transparency and the importance of evidence. By harmonizing our reporting, our data collection, and our analysis of PSEAH data, we can strengthen our safeguarding efforts and our programs. By the way, there's a great article in DevEx today on this particular initiative. Another important development, as you know, is the recent adoption of a model PSEAH clause that will be included in all agreements between the UN and governments. This clause reaffirms the shared PSEAH commitment with governments and outlines key areas of cooperation on PSEAH. Its inclusion is a big step forward, as PSEAH really is a sovereign issue, and it's going to strengthen our engagement with national governments on this particular critical issue. As part of the common approach, we need to continue to break down the silos and ensure we provide comprehensive education and learning, support, and technical guidance on PSEAH to practitioners on the ground. This could be done through an expansion of the initiatives such as the RSH, for example, which currently provides support to a wide number of NGOs. This would also reduce duplication across the aid sector and ensure high-quality PSEAH advice, tools, learning, and advice at the global level. Finally, and perhaps most importantly, we need to ensure that our PSEAH efforts are properly resourced. But we also need to ensure that we're using our resources efficiently. By adopting a common approach and reducing duplication, we can maximize the use of existing resources. This is particularly important in the context of shrinking aid budgets and increasing demands on our resources. We also know that the risk of SEAH increases when assistance and critical support to vulnerable populations diminishes. Adopting a common approach to PSEAH will enable us to collectively fulfill our responsibility to protect vulnerable communities and enhance our efforts to address and prevent sexual exploitation and abuse, and also sexual harassment. And then finally, and to support Dr. Gaia, we need our leaders to have the courage to bring this issue out from the dark. They need to afford it the gravitas it deserves, because without that leadership, we're not going to be truly successful in addressing sexual exploitation, abuse, and sexual harassment. Thank you, Emma, and thank you everybody for joining.
Thank you very much, Christian. And thanks to all the participants for joining us. I think today really marks a point of starting to have more collective conversations to overcome the common challenges which we all see, no matter what sector we're working in, no matter which country we're working in. We hope that you found today useful and you've heard a bit more about CAPSEAH. Do take a closer look, and if your organisation hasn't already done so, please do consider looking at how you can use CAPSEAH and endorsing it within your organisation. We will be sharing this roundtable recording and slides with you shortly, as well as other resources. If you want to hear about future RSH webinars, please do subscribe to our newsletter. We will put the link in the chat. Please do sign up to the RSH newsletter to hear about these future events, including events related to CAPSEAH. And just to say thank you to you all for attending for the last 90 minutes. We hope to connect with you again soon, and have a lovely rest of your day. Thank you very much.